Okay, so this week we are celebrating the most holy body and blood of Christ, so Corpus Christi. And the first reading is from Deuteronomy 8. And you want to read, Donna?
Please.
What page is that? 154.
A reading from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses said to the people, "Remember how for 40 years now the Lord your God has directed all your journeying in the desert, so as to test you by affliction and find out whether or not it was your intention to keep his commandments. He therefore let you be afflicted with hunger and then fed you with manna, a food unknown to you and your fathers, in order to show you that not by bread alone does one live, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of the Lord. Do not forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that place of slavery, who guided you through the vast and terrible desert with its serpents and scorpions, its parched and waterless ground, who brought forth water for you from the flinty rock and fed you in the desert with manna, a food unknown to your fathers." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So what is manna?
So that's the bread that came down from heaven when they were in the desert. And it appeared in the desert. It appeared like little, it looked like little hosts. If you think about hosts, that's how they would have, it looked like hosts. And so this was way back in the desert. And, hi, Susan.
Hello.
So the first part about it that's kind of amazing is that Moses tells the people, now this is right after the people did the golden calf incident. And so Moses went back up on the mountain and he says, "Remember how for 40 years now the Lord your God has directed all your journeying in the desert so as to test you by affliction, to find out whether or not it was your intention to keep his commandments." So isn't that interesting? He gave them a 40-year trial. And so that it was a test. And they failed, right? The only ones who made it were, who is the two people? We did this in Caleb and Joshua, right? 2 people made it out of, what, 500,000?
Wow.
And so when I thought about that, I thought, wow, the path is narrow. I mean, only 2 people made it, right? And so we can't bring our
Generation.
yeah. No one made it in
But
that
like
first
their kids
generation,
made it, so it wasn't
right?
just Caleb and
Joshua, right? Yeah, but I mean, the first generation of people that God freed, that was the only ones that actually made it into the promised land. But we can't bring our idols. And what are idols that we have? We have things like pride, lust,
money.
greed, resentment, self-will, love of self, contempt of God. And all these things will hold us back. So we don't want to bring that because that'll keep us from going to the promised land. I mean, if you're attached to that, then you'll probably be parking in purgatory for a while if if you're lucky enough to make it that far. That's just the reality of it. But I think that's kind of a wake-up call. Moses calls it, though, a test by God. Isn't that interesting? He says the whole, so what this does is it reveals to their heart, right? In the desert, they had to rely totally on God and not trust in themselves and not trust on their own means, but God kind of revealed what was in their hearts. And for the most part, it wasn't good. They left Egypt, but God got them out of Egypt, but he couldn't get Egypt out of them, because they just wanted to go back, and that's what they were telling God. They still long for the sin that they had. And really, isn't that the truth? When people come to Christ, they'll turn away, but they'll look back and say, wow, I really like doing this and I like doing that. And so they'll love their sin more than they'll love Christ. And that's really, it's a harsh way of saying it, but that's kind of the truth, is that they love that other way of life because self-pleasure and everything else, easy self-pleasure and all that. But if you look at what he says, it's to see if it was your intention to keep his commandments. So keeping the commandments is important. It still is important. So we don't, and he mentions it again. Do not forget, Lord, the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that place of slavery. Well, God also delivered us from a place of slavery, right? When we get baptized, we were once slaves to sin, all of us, right? We were living in sin, and God saved us from that. So we're no longer slaves to sin, right? He frees you, and we can say, okay, I want that chain back on my neck, or I'm free of that. And that's really God freed you of it, but you got to throw the chain off. A lot of us just carry that chain around and
like Marley.
Yeah, like Marley in the Christmas Carol, right? When he walked in with all the chains, yeah. Well, that's kind of, Jesus took the lock and took it off, but we can still choose to carry that slavery or, to the sin or not. And I think that's kind of important. So he's saying, don't forget that he freed you of this. And he guided you through this terrible place, right? He guided you through, have you guys been to the desert before? If you've been to the desert, there's no water, there's nothing. It's hot. It's
Cold
just
at night, though.
right. It's cold at night. It's hot during the day, and imagine not having any cover, maybe a tent. And so they relied on the water that God gave them. The rock followed them and gave them water supernaturally. So you have this big rock moving along with them through the desert, and Paul said, and the rock was Christ. If you think about that, and so they had this supernatural water, and then God gave them bread that would come from heaven, the manna. And so that's what ties it to Corpus Christi, is that they were fed by this supernatural bread. But what happened? They all still died, right? They all, this wasn't Jesus's body, blood, soul, and divinity is the food that is a seed for everlasting life. And I'll go through that more in the gospel. But
Could they have loaded that rock in a cart and brought it along?
No, it just followed him.
Because the animals would take a lot of water, and that many people would take a lot of water.
Yeah, it said it followed him. So I'm thinking it was, it was probably a 20-ton rock, that just moved. It just moved along in the desert. They moved and it moved. So people, when you really break it down and think about that, what a miracle, we got, I wrote an article about Joan of Arc, and it talks about, nowadays we have all these Marvel movies and everything else, where we have superheroes, but when we read the Bible, you can really see superheroes there. You can read about the life of Joan of Arc, and she was amazing. This little girl ended up, running the whole army. And then we went to the church where she brought the one king, and he was coronated. So that's pretty amazing. And so I try to tie that all together, but we have to, we kind of make fantasy movies and people idolize, and this is their role model, is these fake things, as opposed to real saints that have lived. And we should be looking at the stories in the Bible, which is all they had. That's the only thing they would read. If you think about Jesus, he would have known the Old Testament. That's it. He would have heard him again and again and again and again, and they would talk about him, and they know him, and they'd hear the Psalms, they'd memorize all the Psalms, and when they were traveling, they would sing the Psalms. As they're approaching, they would sing Psalm 118, 19, 20, 21, as they're going up into Jerusalem. And so they had these memorized. And so we have so much knowledge, so much information. We're overloaded with information. Look at the back. That's, there's probably 2,000 books there, right? If you look at, there's on the other side, and there's rows and rows of bookshelves. Well, they had one book, right? And they knew it. And I think now we have the sum of all knowledge in our phone or in, any device. But what does it, and we're more illiterate than we were in the 1800s.
They had scrolls, not books.
Yeah, they had scrolls. Well, they wouldn't even, it would have been oral. The people wouldn't have had any scrolls. They would have known it orally. They would have the mother and father would have been taught it, and they would have said it 1,000 times, and then they'd tell their kids again and again and again. And actually it says drill it into their head. That's actually what it says in the Old Testament. And so there's certain things we should know, and so it's good to go over different verses again and again. So we're going to actually cover John 6, and we're going to cover it again in a couple weeks. But it's good to put that in your head, because the more you read it, the more you're like, wow, I don't know how this could be interpreted in any other way. We also have, so it says at the bottom here, who brought forth water for you from the flinty rock. So he's pointing out that's very understated. I mean, if you don't understand that, this rock followed them everywhere they went, and there was 500,000 people. Think about that, 500,000 people traveling, slow as Moses, going through the desert, wandering around, and this thing got enough water for all of them, and their animals, as Charlie was mentioning. And the animals drink a lot of water. Their camels, if they had them, and cows and sheep or whatever they had. They actually didn't have any cows and sheep, I don't think, at that point. Because I don't know if they got any, I don't think so. But they still had, it still would have been a ton of water. And fed you in the desert with manna, a food unknown to your fathers. So, again, this first reading ties in the Feast of Corpus Christi. And this is the basis. Jesus, what we're going to hear in John 6 is he says, at the end, he said, unlike your ancestors who ate and still died, whoever eats this bread will live forever. Yeah, so the manna, they ate it, and it was just a regular food. But we have the Eucharist. We'll never die. Jesus said, if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will not die. Right here, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. And so we'll get into that in a few minutes here.